The White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2's ending delves even deeper into its characters, raising some potentially dangerous scenarios for Timothy, Greg, Gary, Rick, and beyond. As has become common with the HBO show, the White Lotus cast of characters continues to be endlessly intriguing in Season 3. Be it the familiar faces from previous seasons or the new characters whose deeper secrets were teased in the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 1's ending, the show is only continuing to carve out its addictive spot in modern TV. While the mystery of the White Lotus Season 3's secret victim from the premiere's cold open was not outright teased in Episode 2, the backstory that will surround that eventual death was fleshed out greatly. This trend will undoubtedly continue in the story of the White Lotus Season 4, yet Season 3 still has more secrets to be revealed. Some link to Timothy's dodgy business dealings that could see him land in prison, while others relate to Rick's quest for revenge, a familiar, morally ambiguous character, and the catty comments between distant friends. Timothy is wrapped up in a money laundering scheme in the White Lotus Season 3. Timothy's connection to Kenneth Nguyen is not ideal for his future. Timothy Ratliff, Jason Isaacs, receives an uncomfortable call from an interviewer in the White Lotus Season 3 EP1. Image via Max. Beginning with Timothy, the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2's ending builds on the hints of his history provided in its predecessor. Timothy finally gets in touch with a stricken Kenneth Nguyen, a fellow businessman whose connections to the company Shokel and the government of Brunei are spawning investigations by outlets like the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. While Timothy's role in Kenneth's operation, and indeed the operation itself, was not outlined in the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 1, Episode 2 provided more context. According to Timothy, who angrily raised questions to Kenneth, the latter was involved in a big money laundering scheme that also involved bribery of some sort linked to the Brunei government. Timothy was complicity in this, earning what he dubs a lowly $10 million from the scheme. With the FBI investigating Nguyen, Timothy is implicated and ends the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2 desperately trying to find a lawyer. If he cannot, Timothy's actions could see him imprisoned. Did Belinda recognize Greg Gary in the White Lotus Season 3? History could come back to bite Greg Gary. John Grise as Greg in White Lotus Season 3. Two of the few recurring characters in the White Lotus Season 3 are Belinda and Greg, now going under the alias Gary. In the White Lotus Season 1, Belinda and Greg were both connected to Jennifer Coolidge's Tanya, with the latter being linked to her death in the White Lotus Season 2's ending in an attempt to take her wealth. Everyone who knew of this scam ended up dead, allowing Greg to return as a free man named Gary in the White Lotus Season 3. But Episode 2's ending could tease trouble on the horizon for him. Belinda, who briefly knew of Greg, was shown to almost recognize him in the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2. She eventually shakes this off, not able to place the man's face. However, if Belinda eventually remembers Greg, she could begin to piece together what happened to Tanya. Naturally, this could uncover some of Greg Gary's biggest secrets that link to one of the White Lotus' most iconic characters. Rick's journey to Bangkok could link to his backstory. Are Jim and Shritala linked to Rick's tragic childhood? Rick Hatchett stalking Shritala and her husband on the internet in the White Lotus Season 3 EP1. Image via Max. The White Lotus setup of its Rick and Jim story in the premiere took some turns in Season 3, Episode 2. Rick is shown looking for Jim, Shritala's husband, for an unknown reason, but it is clear his motives are not entirely good. In the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2, he overhears Shritala stating that she is visiting Jim in Bangkok, who is recovering from a stroke, before telling his girlfriend Chelsea that he also needs to travel to Bangkok for a few days. This development of the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2's ending was expected, but the hints of the motivations for Rick's search make it even more intriguing. During a wellness session, Rick reveals that his mother died from a drug overdose when he was 10 and that his father was murdered before Rick was even born. While the intricate details of Rick's feud with Jim and Shritala are not clear, they evidently stem from revenge. Therefore, Rick's tragic childhood could be the sole reason he is seeking out Jim Hollinger in the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2's ending. Laurie may not be as innocent as the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 1 made her seem. The entire friendship group seems rotten to the core. Perhaps one of the biggest questions stemming from the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 1's ending is why Laurie was crying in her room. Initially, the premiere implied that this was because she is the odd one out in her trio of friends, not conforming to the competitive, backhanded compliments and gossiping that Jacqueline and Kate seem to enjoy. However, the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2's ending may prove that Laurie is not as innocent as the show first insinuated. This time around, it is Jacqueline who retires to her bedroom earlier than her friends. Just as she and Kate began talking about Laurie in the same scenario the night before, Laurie began gossiping about Jacqueline to Kate. This proves that there is not any one victim in this group of friends and that each one is as bad as the next when it comes to tearing each other down. How this builds up and culminates remains to be seen, but The White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2's ending hints that an explosion of drama may be caused by all three women equally, rather than two ganging up on one.